Because everyone understands why a spy agency would want blackmail material on high net worth individuals and heads of state. I think what far fewer people understand is that spy agencies want financial facilitators much more than they want blackmail material. They need a deal maker who is able to broker deals that the U.S. government does not want to be seen as brokering, but that they want to happen in the world because it advances U.S. interests, as we say. Advances the interests of insiders. But that is what we say. We want this pipeline to be constructed. We want this economic integration zone to be constructed. But some of our other partners would be very upset if they thought we were the ones behind it. So it has to be negotiated covertly. So it's handled by CIA instead of the State Department. And the CIA needs someone to covertly broker the deal and to shelter the transaction, cloak it in offshore bank accounts and complex debt instruments to launder the money so that it doesn't look like the U.S. government had anything to do with it. They need financial fixers. And so let me start this by giving you guys a couple of archetypes to keep in mind. And then I'm going to do a formal presentation on this week. Now, understand, during this whole period from 1979 to 1988, the private CIA structure that we live under was established. Coming out of the Carter reforms, the CIA was increasingly privatized in order to circumvent the handcuffs put on the CIA during the late 70s. In 1985. Now, again, National Security Advisor is the highest ranking position in the cabinet. The Secretary of State is the head of the State Department. The Director of Central Intelligence is the head of the CIA. The Secretary of Defense is the head of the military. The National Security Advisor is the head of all three from the White House side. Defense, diplomacy, and intelligence. Because the National Security Advisor runs the National Security Council, which is the White House policy council that the State Department, the Defense Department, and the CIA have to carry out the activities of. So this is the highest person in government other than the president. Okay. So he was the guy running the CIA side of the State Department his whole career at State. Then he leaves the State Department in 2014 to run the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, the oldest think tank in the country. That's 2014. He runs it from 2014 to 2021. And in 2021, he becomes Director of Central Intelligence, head of the CIA. Okay. But the year that he leaves State to head one of the most powerful endowments in the world and the oldest think tank in the country, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace needs money, needs donors. So we've talked about Bill Burns has gotten in trouble with close ties to China, okay? Bill Burns, the Carnegie Endowment, received millions of dollars from a CCP front, Chinese businessman with close links to the CCP, who himself leads a group that explicitly says that its job is to advance the policy objectives set out by the CCP. Put that CCP guy on the board of Carnegie, created a Carnegie Xinhua Center. This is because your job when you run an NGO or an endowment is to raise money from people who have money to support things they want to get done with their money. So as soon as Bill Burns decides he's going to run the Carnegie Endowment now, where he'll make a lot more money than running the State Department, he wants to raise money from outside donors for the Carnegie Endowment. He wants a financial fixer to arrange money for the Carnegie Endowment. So who does he meet with? He meets with Jeffrey Epstein, the man who's connected to money. He first meets him when he's Deputy Secretary of State, but then he travels twice to Jeffrey Epstein's New York townhouse, the infamous New York townhouse. Twice in 2014, Bill Burns, now the new head of the Carnegie Endowment, goes to the personal residence 2 times to have a private in-person conversation with Jeffrey Epstein, who had been indicted for underage prostitution in 2008. Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted sex predator in 2014. He did get indicted in Florida. He got a sweetheart plea deal. But why would the guy running the CIA side of the State Department, who would go on to run the CIA itself, go to Jeffrey Epstein's personal townhouse twice to meet in person rather than having a phone call that could be tracked and traced? Do you think Bill Burns was going there for, 16-year-old girls hanging around? No. Bill Burns is going there to raise money for the Carnegie Endowment. And he knows that Jeffrey Epstein can arrange for donors to donate to the Carnegie Endowment if he can convince Jeffrey Epstein that what Carnegie will do with that money will advance the interests of the donors. But there is asset has a technical meaning. And this word asset is going to fuck up this whole thing if people don't understand this. This is a facilitator, a CIA facilitator, what they'll call a cooperative contact, a liaison, not an asset. Let me do a brief detour here. Now, let me explain this to you, because this is where they're going to try to hoodwink you. This is the heart of the matter. There's something called a 201 file. Okay. There's a file that's kept on all assets. And I want to just go through this with you here, okay? The human intelligence food chain. Asset is recruited in the CIA asset validation system. It's recorded in a database. There's an annual revalidation, and there is a counterintelligence check. There's a need to vet their links to foreign intelligence, yada, yada, yada. Okay? Everyone who's a formal asset or who's an agent gets a 201 file on them. They are an asset, formally. Okay? But there are levels to working with the CIA, but not formally working for the CIA, where there is no 201 file. Okay? I'm going to go through some of these levels. There's a cooperative contact, someone who wittingly responds to tasking, but is unwilling to enter a controlled clandestine relationship. Co-optee, a private individual who assists on a temporary or opportunistic basis. Ad hoc help. For example, arranging a charter flight, passing a suitcase. They are not considered formally assets. They are a friend of the station. And then there are liaisons, facilitators, business intermediaries, friends of the station, casual quid pro quo relationships, occasionally helpful, never formally recruited. This is what I'm trying to describe to you about Jeffrey Epstein. It was Adnan Khashoggi, a wealthy Saudi businessman, an arms dealer, who acted as the middleman between the U.S. and Israeli government for operations in Iran. Adnan Khashoggi was the Jeffrey Epstein of the Iran deal. Bruce Rappaport was the Jeffrey Epstein of the Iraq deal. The similarities between the Iran affair and the Iraqi pipeline deal are striking, several officials said. In both instances, Robert McFarlane, the then national security advisor, was drawn into a deal by a middleman with personal financial stakes. In addition, American support for the Iraqi project was handled outside normal government channels, and the small number of officials involved were instructed to keep it secret from their colleagues. This is why you run it through an outside network. This is why Bill Burns would be meeting with Jeffrey Epstein. This is why Bill Clinton would be meeting with Jeffrey Epstein. Not because Bill Clinton is on a client list getting a pipeline of 13-year-old girls from Jeffrey Epstein. How many times did Jeffrey Epstein visit the White House? At least 17 times. Not a phone call where that can be traced, where it might leak and you don't know who's listening. You do personal meetings like this because you have private business. Jeffrey Epstein visited the Clinton White House at least 17 times. Now, at the time, he had durable power of attorney over Les Wexner's entire financial empire, the largest retail chain in the entire country, Limited Brands was. What do you think they talked about 17 times? Jeffrey Epstein was credited with coming up with the idea for the Clinton Global Initiative. And in fact, the Clintons even acknowledged his role before his scandal. This was before the sex offending thing. Mr. Epstein was part of the original group that conceived the Clinton Global Initiative. What is the Clinton Global Initiative? It is bringing together pools of donors with huge amounts of money to give to a private foundation that also does philanthropic and humanitarian work, basically shadow covert action, relief programs. Oh, but to groups that the State Department wants nudged in a particular direction or wants logistical resupplies to. That's why you tap an outside network of financiers and gun runners covertly through CIA liaisons, so that the thing happens by itself because of private actors that the U.S. government had nothing to do with, and it just so happened to advance what the National Security Council wanted. An agent. He's not even an asset. He was a dude who was recruited to Bear Stearns without a college degree when Ace Greenberg had an office philosophy of what they called PSD, poor, smart, driven to make money. And he was a risk-taking dude who was willing to be the front man and do daredevil financial shit that everybody else was afraid they'd lose their license or get prosecuted for doing. And made a market out of it. Donors threw their money behind him, first with the Bear Stearns Network, then later with Les Wexner. And so he came to have access to a network of donors that became useful to both the Central Intelligence Agency, the Israeli government, very likely the Saudis, the British, and the French as well. Safari Club, that whole network. It's an international web. They all have soft alliances, but just a little bit of discrepancy on certain foreign policy things. And so he is one of a pool of outside financiers who can be tapped to do discreet brokering of deals, which he juices with a high life of crazy parties, a wild island, hot girls, to which helps bring people into these deals. And then he uses his Bear Stearns network to arrange the offshore financing for it. This is why everyone who I've talked to, who's met with Epstein personally, they all say that he doesn't know fuck all about currency trading or, or can recall with any, specificity or interest, the trade craft of complex debt instrument, back-to-back loans, and the intricacies of the offshore, because that's not what he is. He was the broker of the deals. And then the back end, the Bear Stearns folks, they'll handle the actual offshore structuring, and the money will come from the donor network who's going to make money on the deal. It is a private, self-sustained, off-the-shelf, standalone enterprise. Just like Ollie North testified to Congress. Private, self-sustained, off-the-shelf, standalone network that can be tapped by the CIA to covertly arrange financing for a covert action when they don't want U.S. government fingerprints on the deal, but they want the deal to happen. Liaison. $10 from Brady Sava. How does the Donald Barr relationship jive with this more organic Epstein origin? Because Bill Barr was the mop-up man for the CIA and Iran-Contra, Brad. Bill Barr was, look up Bill Barr. I mean, I can do it right here. I just don't want to keep opening new tabs. Bill Barr, mop-up man, Iran-Contra. He was the guy who blocked the Congress investigating CIA malfeasance during Iran-Contra. Back in 1992, the first time Bill Barr was U.S. Attorney General, iconic New York Times writer William Safire referred to him as cover-up General Barr because of his role in burying evidence in both Iraqgate and Iran-Contra. Christmas Day of 1992, the New York Times featured a screaming all-caps headline: Attorney General Bill Barr had covered up evidence of crimes by Reagan and Bush in the Iran-Contra scandal. And what did he do? Because Bill Barr started his career in the CIA. Let's just go to his Wikipedia real quick, and you'll see this. Bill Barr, not only did his father recruit Jeffrey Epstein to the Dalton School, but Bill Barr was personally involved in the very operation that Jeffrey Epstein got his start facilitating, the Adnan Khashoggi network in Iran-Contra. Bill Barr, whose father was in the CIA, Donald Barr, started his career in the CIA, told his high school guidance counselor his dream job was to be the head of the CIA, and that the special prosecutor wanted to make into the CIA's role in Iran-Contra. Having come from the CIA, he becomes the legislative affairs guy, the blocker and tackler, to block Congress access to documents about what the CIA was doing. So Bill Barr was the firewall that protected the CIA and the DOD and the National Security Council from Justice Department investigations into just how deep the covert action went. And he's the Attorney General when Jeffrey Epstein dies, as people are asking questions about how deep that went, the CIA activity went with Jeffrey Epstein. And he's the one that OPR directly reports to when OPR is asking questions to Alex Acosta about whether or not Jeffrey Epstein belonged to intelligence. It's not enough to just get the Alex Acosta transcript. We need all files, records, text messages, emails around Bill Barr and his deputy Jeffrey Rosen and the OPR team. Because if this footnote is all we have, in answering a question about whether he had knowledge of Epstein being an intelligence asset, Acosta stated to OPR the answer is no. Why don't we have this transcript, despite the 348-page OPR report, verbatim quoting long emails, but for this, it's just a footnote, footnote 244? I believe part of the reason is that Bill Barr may have blocked that. OPR reported directly to Bill Barr. Bill Barr was involved in the exact same network as Jeffrey Epstein, the Iran-Contra network. The New York Times referred to him as the cover-up general for Iran-Contra. Jeffrey Epstein got his entire start through Iran-Contra, from Edgar Bronfman while he's at Bear Stearns, to Adnan Khashoggi while he was out on his own from 1991 to 1997. Adnan Khashoggi was the guy who pitched the Iran-Contra deal to McFarlane, the National Security Advisor, to even do Iran-Contra. And he's Jeffrey Epstein's client. So the literal middleman of the scandal that Bill Barr covered up is a client. Bill Barr's just running the same cover up that was done that he got his professional start doing, first at the CIA and then as a lawyer protecting the CIA from Congress, and then finally burying the investigation when he was Attorney General the first time. So we need all of Barr's communications. And if it turns out that there was a technological glitch in November 2020 that wiped all of his communications the same way in 2008, all of the communications of Alex Acosta were wiped on the official justice.gov emails, then we didn't know that. But I want to know that Pam Bondi's looked for this. And let there at least be the headlines: Bill Barr's emails turn up missing, technological glitch, while there's an internal investigation as to whether or not Jeffrey Epstein belonged to intelligence. And the OPR team is reporting to Bill Barr. Turns out Bill Barr's emails are now gone from that too. I don't know if that's true, but I don't think Justice Department has asked for it. Did Bill Barr lean on OPR to only ask one question that was the wrong question to ask? Did Bill Barr shape OPR's investigation into Jeffrey Epstein? We have a right to know that. All communications between Jeffrey Ragsdale and Jeffrey Rosen, Bill Barr's deputy. Jeffrey Rosen, you may remember, because Jeffrey Rosen is who led the secret team before January 6th. You guys remember this? Jeffrey Rosen, January 6th. Secret team. Exclusive secret commandos with shoot to kill authority were at the Capitol. On January 3rd, 3 days before January 6th, Bill Barr's deputy, Jeffrey Rosen, who handled the day-to-day with OPR for the Jeffrey Epstein investigation, he became acting head of the Justice Department when Bill Barr resigned. But they ran a secret operation 3 days before January 6th. The heads of a half dozen elite government special operations teams met in Quantico. The subsequent deployment of these shadowy commandos on January 6th was never revealed until Newsweek did a year after. Right after January 1st, Jeffrey Rosen, then the acting attorney general on January 6th, approved implementation of contingency plans dealing with the most extreme possibilities. A terrorist attack involving a weapon of mass destruction. Oh, like a pipe bomb? And declaration of measures to implement continuity of government. Rosen made a unilateral decision to take the preparatory steps to deploy Justice Department so-called national forces. There was no formal request from the Capitol Police, the Secret Service, or the Metropolitan Police Department. He just had a hunch something was going to go down. Bechtel wants to go to another U.S. government agency. It's called corporation, but that's just because it's making money on it for the U.S. Treasury. These are contracts essentially, rather than grants. But it does business dealings to smooth the way for U.S. businesses operating in foreign markets by cutting them loans and insurance. Now, you know who the head of, so the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, OPIC, you know what it is today? Here's a funny story. It's founded in 1971. In 2019, under Trump, it was dissolved and turned into the DFC, the United States International Development Finance Corporation. So it's not the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. It is USAID, but for financing contracts rather than grants. The U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, DFC. This is USAID, but for financing through loans and insurance. Okay. $20 from Jal Tory. Thank you, sir. The Overseas Private Investment Corporation was the United States government's development finance institution until it merged with a wing of USAID to form DFC, the Development Finance Corporation, again, a U.S. government agency. Mobilized private capital to help solve critical development challenges, and in doing so, advance the foreign policy of the United States. So this is a government agency that mobilizes private capital, so it gets together outside investors to help smooth the business dealings for U.S. companies to make inroads in foreign markets. Do you know who is currently running the DFC? Jeffrey, the son of Jeffrey Epstein's largest client. Ben Black, because this is why I'm calling this Jeffrey Epstein and USAID Part 2. Why am I connecting to USAID? Because you need to understand this structure to understand how to reform the USAID function. Leon Black, Ben Black's dad, Ben Black running DFC. Leon Black was also a donor to Trump and a VIP at the inauguration and a big-time Trump guy. This is part of what you were, when you hear Trump say, we don't want to release stuff because, you know, it's going to ruin people's reputations, even though they didn't engage in child sex trafficking. But everyone's going to think, if you release these Epstein files and you see like Leon Black's name there, that it's going to be, that they're going to think that Leon Black was trafficking in underage kids or whatever. I don't believe that to be the case. And I think Trump is right about that because people misunderstand the function that Epstein served. Girls' juice deals. Did he pawn off girls on the people he was doing deals with? Bet your ass he did. That's a different thing than, blackmail. That's a different thing than like the CIA and Mossad collecting the tapes of the people having sex with those girls in order to blackmail them. Like the CIA, Israeli intelligence, Saudi intelligence, French intelligence, British intelligence likely wanted those deals done and looked the other way about how Epstein juiced those deals. Began to promote the idea of a Middle East Marshall Plan by which all countries in the region would be added economically. And you're going to see this again in the Jeffrey Epstein story. You're going to see this again with U.S.-Israel economic integration zones where Les Wexner financial assets, like massed industries, were helping to do economic these deals where you had we'll go over examples of this. Oh my gosh, we're at 2 hours and 45 minutes. In the 1990s, you had the same economic integration plan in developing countries in Africa to get sweetheart deals and exporting goods duty free to the U.S. as long as they had like 11% qualifying Israel touch point in the supply chain. So the U.S. wanted to bring them into U.S. economic cooperation, wanted to make sure Israel got its cut on the deal because of the Israeli presence politically in the countries. And you had Les Wexner Enterprises under Jeffrey Epstein's durable power of attorney as the authorized signatory who were setting up the businesses to qualify for that. Were any of those juiced the same way this was? We'll get to that if we have time. I can't believe we're already at 2 hours and 45 minutes. I feel like we're. Remember, when was Ehud Barak president? At the same time Bill Clinton was. Bill Clinton was in office from January 1991 to January 2001. And he is so tight with Jeffrey Epstein that they are meeting dozens of times. Were any deals that Jeffrey Epstein met with Bill Clinton about 17 times in the White House between Bill Clinton's American government and Ehud Barak's Israel government brokered by Jeffrey Epstein in the same way that Bruce Rappaport served as the go-between between U.S. and Israel on sensitive international deals during the Ronald Reagan administration. I think we have a right to know. That would explain Epstein belonging to intelligence without being a formal asset, because there was no 201 file on Bruce Rappaport, despite doing all this back and forth legwork for the CIA, with the CIA. He was not a CIA asset. He was getting commission fees from Bechtel and doing favors for his donors. There's a firewall being constructed at CIA to not even open the door about all these other touch points, whether it's Israel or Saudi Arabia or the UK or the French, or activities that they don't want declassified. Because now you go back in history and you say, oh my God, this pipeline that's still around, this was covertly financed through outside financiers by the CIA, and this pipeline is sitting right here in Jordan. This economic zone is right here in Kenya, and this was arranged by Jeffrey Epstein. We don't want to give an excuse to the president of Egypt to scuttle this by corrupting it, because now there's an international scandal because it had CIA touch points, because we had to dig up the Epstein documents. You can see why this was relegated to a single footnote on page 169, trying to say, oh, not an asset, and no internal investigation, no files from the CIA Office of General Counsel, no transcript of what was actually asked and what was actually said. I thought it was very interesting when I saw Naftali Bennett's statements on this. As former Prime Minister of Israel, with the Mossad having reported directly to me, I can say with 100% certainty, the accusation that Jeffrey Epstein somehow worked for Israel or the Mossad running a blackmail ring is categorically and totally false. Yeah, that's probably true. But notice how it's limited to saying that he was running a blackmail ring. The sentence does not end here. It's this part, which just like with this, leads you to think, okay, oh, you mean he never worked with the government of Israel? No. He's saying he never worked with Israel running a blackmail ring. Just like, okay, yeah, I said he belonged to intelligence, but I have no knowledge of him being an intelligence asset. So you're like, okay, so he's not an intelligence asset, so he never worked with U.S. intelligence. Like, that's what they want you to fill in the blank saying in your head. Because you can work with intelligence without being an intelligence asset. You can work with Israel or Israeli intelligence without running a blackmail ring. You just do what Bruce Rappaport did. You just do what Mark Rich did. You just do what Adnan Khashoggi did. You just did what Christopher Dragul did. You just do what Gustavo Alfaro did. You just do what James Giffen did. You just do what Aga Abedi did. It's a friggin' playbook. It's like there's dozens of these people. It's probably true. There probably was not a written list of financial transactions using these girls for prostitution. I'm not even convinced that there was some prostitution element. I think it's like the same thing, girls juice deals, that he pawned the girls off on his friends and his potential business partners so that they associated doing business with Jeffrey Epstein with getting a currency that you can't buy. Beautiful young women. So you want to do deals with Epstein. If you're a 65-year-old minister of defense from Jordan, when you see Epstein talk about the deal, you're probably getting lucky. So here you'll see